Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. If you have any questions as we go through this webinar, please type them into your questions box on the screen, and we'll be sure to get to them. And right now I'm going to kick it over to Alex, and we're going to get started.
All right, thank you, Emma. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Alex Burns, and I'm the Vice President of P3. I also am lucky enough to be in charge of development here at P3, so am often lucky to work with a lot of our integration partners on different functionality that we're bringing to the integration between the two systems. So that kind of is what has brought us here today to meet with our partners at AgVantage, a company that we've worked with for a few years now, have a number of clients in common that are sharing information between P3 and AgVantage. So I think with that, I'll introduce you to Tim Machutt and Don Kingfus from AgVantage and allow them to introduce themselves and maybe just give us a little bit of information about AgVantage before we jump into all the details here.
All right, sounds good. I'll start again. Tim Machutt. Pretty sure a lot of you guys know me from just working with me in support, but primarily I've been with AgVantage for almost 13 years now. Primarily started in a support role, your day-to-day, taking phone calls from you guys, and then I also about 3 years ago I kind of took a new role within AgVantage along with my same support role. I now am part of vendor relations, so I work specifically with P3, but not just P3, but with P3 I work with mainly Jane Lapsley. I probably butchered that last name, Jane, so I do apologize. But yeah, primarily we work together on getting those connections made. From a support standpoint, we work hand in hand together with our mutual customer to make sure that you guys are getting what you need out of the integration, which again I'll be kind of talking about a little bit later during the webinar.
I'm Dawn Klinkfus. I've been here 22 years this year. My main focus probably for the last 20-ish years has been energy. I'm just getting caught up on the P3 interface, working with Tim, just trying to help on the energy side of the things that you need and you ask for, and working together with us and P3 to get you, all of the information that you need. So looking forward to this. This is my first one.
Great. All right. And then I think, Tim, one of the things when we were just kind of talking back and forth that I think is kind of cool, maybe a good thing for you guys to highlight right now is I know you do like an annual user conference, but then you do some smaller kind of breakout regional groups that I think that's kind of interesting for people to know. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about here for a second.
Yeah. So so again, you guys know we have our June conference. We are looking at, and we've done these a couple of times in the past, where kind of on our off season of the executive conferences that we have. So we have our executive conference. Usually that's where usually pick a place that's nice and warm in the winter. But we do those every other year. So a lot of times in the off year, we try to do regional conferences. So the one that's coming up for kind of our Pacific Northwest customers is one in Washington State, out of Pasco, I believe. That one is on the schedule already. We're still trying to figure out for some Midwest regional conferences, primarily because as you guys are aware, usually during those winter months, we have other things going on like installs and some mergers happening. So from a resources perspective, we're not sure yet if we're going to be able to do additional regional conferences this year just because of that. But we continually focus on doing that. So primarily that allows us to get any new software updates or any additional training that allows you to have that in person, face-to-face type of connections if you're not available to attend the June conference. The June conference, I will talk about that now is the June conference. We are going back to Mystic Lake. So again, for the people that have been attending the conference, that's where we're going to for the next one in June. So there'll be some additional information on that. Another thing I would just like to probably highlight too that a lot of people may not be aware of is we've added a kind of a new e-training or remote training session, and it's strictly for new features. That is free, so you guys don't have to pay like you pay for additional e-training. We don't charge you for that, and we strictly go through every agronomy package, and we highlight all the new features in between each session, or in between the last time we did the new features to the current one. And there's one coming up in the next 2 weeks. So that is a really good session just to stay up to date on how the software progresses, any updates come out. We also do include a session for interfaces. So if there is updates to any third-party integrations, we include those too, not just our software internally, but any updates or new interfaces that are coming out too. So outside of conferences, that's another really good resource to keep updated on things that are happening with AgVantage. So.
Oh, that's cool that you guys do that. How often do you do something like that? It just seems like that would be a really good resource.
Quarterly. That was quarterly.
Quarterly?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we do one a quarter, because that's how we develop. Is we kind of develop by quarter. So I mean, it makes sense for us to do a new features every quarter. So.
Yep. Okay. Great.
Yep.
Oh, that's really cool. So just, kind of tagging onto that, just so that, everybody here knows that, as we continue to, this integration has really evolved over time since we started it a couple of years ago. It starts out pretty basic, and then kind of what we've done over the course of the last few years is really take into consideration feedback from common clients, what would make the integration more valuable. So we were actively involved, the two teams, the P3 team and the AgVantage team. As Tim mentioned, Jane Lapsley, she's in charge of all of our integrations here at P3. And so she, we're meeting on a monthly basis with the AgVantage team to talk about, hey, what have we heard from people? What would priorities be? What would bring the most value to our common clients? So just figure that that's worth mentioning, that we are having ongoing regular conversations, about this integration and how we can make it ultimately more valuable for you folks that are listening today. So what I was thinking we could do just real quickly, just in case, because I know there's kind of a mix of people on the call today, people who are working with P3 and not AgVantage, or AgVantage and not P3, or whatever it might be. So what I figured I could do is just do a quick show you kind of how, let's see, let me get over here and move this out of the way. But basically just show you, this is just a test database, but just kind of show you, if for those of you that are P3 users, you are familiar with this screen, this is the dashboard that you see as soon as you log in. And so basically when we talk about integration, we kind of talk about it in phases, just because that sort of seems to be the easiest way to do it. So really the first thing that has to happen is phase one. Without phase one, you can't really do much else. So really what that is the basic customer demographics coming over from AgVantage and into P3. That way, once we have that connection established where we're kind of referring to the accounts the same way, then we can kind of pull different data points and push things and move things in different directions. And the other thing that phase one is helpful for is that we understand that you're running your energy business out of AgVantage. That is where that is happening. That's where you're setting up new customers, new tanks, whatever that might be. And then P3, we really are living in the safety documentation space. That's really what we do. So by having it set up in AgVantage, come over to P3, we're really creating efficiency for not only employees in the field, but also just any sort of reporting, keeping things up to date. That integration is what it's going to do is when we first start, it's going to bring over all your active propane customers into P3 from AgVantage. And then once that initial setup and initial list is established, then it's going to send over nightly gains and losses. So any new customers are going to get added to the system. So when you come into work the next day, they're going to be available. And then any customers that, may no longer be a customer are going to be set to be archived, removed from all your active reports, but still archived in P3. So should you need to access their safety related documentation in the future, it would be there. So with that, just want to show you very quickly kind of what this looks like. Again, this is account list in P3. You click into the customer account, you can very quickly go right to the activity log and understand exactly any of the actions that have happened, that have taken place as data is passing from AgVantage. So you can see, again, this is test data, was originally set up as a new account in December of 23. And then as different accounts or updates have happened to that location, AgVantage will ping back and make sure that the most up-to-date location data is there on that account in P3. So just wanted to kind of show that you can always see exactly, very clearly, what data is coming over and exactly when that happened. So I think that kind of shows you what it looks like. That's kind of, again, phase one. So phase two is what we're talking about when we are talking about data that is passed. Now that data's come into P3, you've potentially gone out and done some work. You've created some interruptions of service or safety inspection data. There's now going to be data points in what we call phase two that are passing back to AgVantage and populating fields in the AgVantage tank file. So some of that's outlined here. I think maybe Dawn and Tim, I'll flip that over to you to talk a little bit more about how that appears in AgVantage and all that.
Yeah, so I'll start here. So to start out, from you guys' seat, the requirements that when you guys decide to integrate AgVantage with P3. So primarily how the integration works is there's a PC, some standalone I recommend a standalone PC. Nothing else really touches this other than other than the integration. And then basically it's a scheduled task that runs on that PC that will send changes from basically the customer tank changes from AgVantage to P3. So, and that can run as often as you want. Usually I set it up to run in the morning, but like if you're not getting enough updates, we can change that to run, every hour if you want to. Usually I think the most often I have it set to right now is every 4 hours. So it just kind of depends on how often you need that data. And then vice versa is once we send the customer and tank information over, then we get, actually, if I'm remembering correctly, we get the inspection information first, and then we send updated tanks over to P3. So, and then basically listed before, you have your standard, you have your standard account information, your account number, your customer lookup information, your address, city, state, zip, whatnot, your tank. And then with the tanks, we send the tank sequence, the tank description, stuff like that over. And then a couple pieces to this that are required is that your fuel type in AgVantage for your propane tanks need to be set to a P. If they're not, that is something I will help you guys with switching over, primarily not just in the tank file, but also if you're using our energy dispatch, we'll have to change them there too. So that is depending on how you have that set up, that is a requirement. And then also if any any tanks that have a fuel use of G, which is primarily reserved for like your grain dryer tanks, we don't send those to P3. So those codes are hard coded in the interface. So which is why it requires you to potentially change that. I mean, our standard, correct me if I'm wrong, Dawn, but I believe our standard recommendation for propane tanks is P. So more of our when we set new customers up, I believe we're using that P propane type or recommending that P propane fuel type.
Recommending it. Once in a while we get an L, but we can easily change it if they did go that way.
Yep. And then yeah, so that's some changes we have to make with that. And then it's just the PC. So, and then Jane is really good about getting us our credentials pretty quickly. So usually I get this up and running probably within about an hour or so, once I have all the requirements and the PC and all that good stuff. And then also we also will have, I would ask that we'd have remote access to the PC. So then if there is an issue, we can troubleshoot. We can easily hop on there, troubleshoot, figure out what's happening, stuff like that. And then, yeah, the last piece here, which technically is the first piece because we're sending this first, is the data that we get from P3. And that primarily resides in the services tab in the energy tank file. And then I actually have these fields labeled along the descriptions of the information that we actually get from pretty much the data within those PDF documents that are generated within P3. We basically pull those data points out that we need to store in the tank file. So those are the different data points that we currently pull from those documents.
All right, great. That's so I think based on that, I think one of the things that we did want to make sure we talked about today is kind of what's the move forward vision, right? We've talked about how it's sort of evolved over the years and where we stand now. But we are again trying to make this thing more valuable as we continue on. So I think, I don't know, maybe Tim or Don, if you want to speak to this, I think you have an upcoming release that's going to bring some more data, or I guess it's going to be some PDF links within the tank file in AgVantage. And I think that's something that we're really excited about. We know is going to be really helpful for folks. So I don't know if that's something you want to talk about, that release and what that's going to look like.
Yeah, so that was recently approved for our quarter four development pipeline. And I'll say that's an estimated pipeline. So, don't quote me wrong. If it does leak into Q1, might do that, but we'll probably between quarter four and quarter one timeframe. Basically, what that's going to be is within the tank file, there'll be a URL link that you'll be able to access, which will call the documents from P3. So we're not going to physically store the documents within the tank file. It's basically just kind of an authentication link from AgVantage to P3 to pull those PDF links to view, so you can view those PDF links without you having to, okay, well, here's the tank information. I'm looking at the services tab. Okay, what PDF documents does this reference? Then I can go in and then I would have to go over to P3 and log into P3 and pull those documents. So the idea is we're going to have a direct connection to P3 within the tank file to pull those documents up. But I want to be clear, we're not really physically storing the PDF documents in AgVantage. We're just calling those connections.
Great, that's wonderful. So yeah, so that's exciting, and so we're looking forward to that. We know it'll be helpful to folks. So based on that, I think maybe we'll check and see if we have any questions, and then kind of get those answered, and then kind of go from there. So I don't know, Emma, if any questions have popped up at this point.
It doesn't look like any questions have come through yet.
Okay. All right, great. Well, why don't if anybody has anything, feel free to type into the chat section there, but kind of based on that, I don't know if there's anything, Dawn or Tim, that you want to add, in closing before we jump off here.
No, just if you guys are interested in the integration, I'll just state that it starts with a support call to get our side going. So there's a couple things that you'll need to approve. Primarily, it's a quote for the software integration cost, and then we do require some additional documentation to be signed that's on file within AgVantage, primarily because we're doing data sharing between two systems. So once those are approved, then Jane gets me the API information, and then once you get me on that PC, it's kind of plug and play. So for the most part. So
I do have one thing to.
Oh, great. Yep.
I do have one thing to add too. We are I'm currently in the process of final testing on saving the changes when you change any one of these. So if P3 updates, let's say a relief valve date, we're going to hang on to that in a file now. So we're starting a history of the changes to the service dates on
Nice.
the services tab. So we'll be able to do some reporting on when did I do this last, you know, that kind of stuff on those
Great.
fields.
Yep. And
Okay.
you'll know, and I'll preface that they'll know that it's from P3 because it will be a specific P3 user
Yeah.
that's making those changes versus an actual user that's manually going into our system, the
Oh,
AgVantage
great.
system,
Okay.
to make those changes. So
Okay. Wonderful. Geez, well, that's great. That's good to know. Okay, great. Well, I think it sounds like that's it. So thank you, Tim, and thank you, Don, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And yeah, if anybody out there ends up with any questions or wants to know more about the integration, feel free to get in touch and we can get you more information. But thank you both for joining us today.
all right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone.